Welcome, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of The Law of Self-Defense, the drowning episode. Yes, I managed to spill water on myself just before we went live. So congratulations to me. Me being, of course, attorney and law of self-defense. Thank you. Thank you very much, as always. That is greatly, greatly appreciated. Let's make sure we are streaming in the places we need to be streaming before we get into our spear defense show. A little bit of an unusual show, but it gives us a good opportunity to talk about some of the dynamics of use of force law, including proportionality and the distinction between some of the distinct characteristics that distinguish non-deadly force and deadly force. And it's more than just the intensity of the force, folks. So the members are streaming. I'm going to ignore Rumble because you can never tell what's going on with Rumble. YouTube is good, and Twitter is also good. Let's just pin that up there. And we should be good to go everywhere. So, actually, let me take a look here. I had a couple of special announcements to make here. See if I can find them. All right. Well, okay. All right. I do have something here. Let's see. Oh, darn it. Come on, folks. You do make things interesting for me. So here today, we're going to be talking about a homeowner who was dealing with a home invasion. An intruder was forcibly and unlawfully entering his home, and this was in Wichita Falls, Texas. You might imagine Texas has fairly good self-defense laws. The homeowner did not have a gun, which is a little surprising for Texas. But he had a plethora of other weapons. Okay, that didn't work. Among which was remarkably enough, a spear, a short spear. And so he did what any reasonable home defender should do when dealing with a forcible and unlawful intruder. You don't fight with the weapons you wish you had. You fight with the weapons you actually have. And it turns out a short spear is a pretty effective close quarters weapon. It is. So, introduction out of the way, everybody make yourselves comfortable. I do want to remind everybody, this is we have a little bit of video today, but it doesn't show the actual fighting, unfortunately. It's from a news broadcast after the event that has some footage inside the home. You will see a little hemoglobin on surfaces inside the home as a result of the use of the spear on the intruder, but you won't see any acts of violence. So hopefully YouTube will not demonetize this show simply because I'm showing non-violent news report footage of a use of force event. That would be awfully nice if that were the case. Normally, of course, when we're showing video, we show it only for Law of Self-Defense members because we do get demonetized when we put that stuff on YouTube and elsewhere. The good news is it's dirt cheap to be a Law of Self-Defense member. You can try it out for just 2 weeks. For 99 cents. And a lot of you have been taking advantage of this opportunity. I'm very grateful for that. Try out Law Self-Defense membership. You get to ask questions and make comments that I'll address during the live shows. We only take those from Law Self-Defense members. Don't bother with YouTube or Rumble or Twitter. I don't look at those comments and questions. You get transcripts of every show. You get all the shows where we get the normally banned violent use of force video analysis. All that for 99 cents for 2 weeks at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. And if you stay a member, it's still only about 30 cents a day, less than $10 a month to be a Law of Self-Defense member. But at least try it out for 99 cents. What have you got to lose? Not even 99 cents, because if you decide you don't like it, I'll refund 200% of your 99 cents. It's a negative risk opportunity, folks. And you can do all that at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. And with that out of the way, let's go into the formal launch of today's show. Let's see. Yeah, sorry about the audio, folks. That should be fixed now, I think. I forgot a setting because I had just doused myself with water. My apologies, but it should be better now with the real expensive microphone actually working. Thanks for the heads up. I appreciate that. Yeah, hemoglobin. You never know what's going to trigger the algorithm with YouTube. So you have to speak in these ridiculous code words like pew pew instead of the normal word you would use. Let's see. All right. So take a couple looks at some news reports here. They're both pretty short and they're both melodramatic. So in full disclosure, this news story just came across my desk. But when I researched it, it turns out it's from 9 years ago. It's from 2014. 2014, right? 9 years ago at this point. But still, raises interesting topics to talk about. So let's take a look at the first of these news. Oh, and because it was 9 years ago, it was at the height of Game of Thrones, the TV show. So both these news reports make lots of references to Game of Thrones. I don't believe the defender here makes any reference to Game of Thrones at all. So they're just throwing in the phrase Game of Thrones because I guess it works with the algorithms for whatever, which is fine. But of course, it doesn't really have anything to do with what we're actually talking about here. So let me pull up the first news report and zoom that in a little bit. So Game of Thrones fan spears drunk home intruder using medieval weapon in Texas. A drunk intruder picked the wrong house to break into in Wichita Falls, Texas on September 16th. That would be 2014. The homeowner, Jimmy Morgan Jr., is an avid Game of Thrones fan and an SCA combat fighter. So SEC stands for the Society for Creative Anachronism. I think I have that right. I believe I have that right. Let me take a quick look. I don't want to get it wrong. A good friend of mine, Sean Sorrentino, out in North Carolina, used to be at least an active member of the Society for Creative Anachronism, SCA. I don't know if he still does that, but I know back in the day, he was an active participant in SCA. SCA does things like recreate medieval type fights. They'll wear armor, they'll use swords and maces, and obviously they're not attempting to actually kill each other, but they're trying to recreate the dynamics of those kinds of combat scenarios. Often my understanding is they're in the context of Renaissance fairs and so forth, and everybody dresses up and has a great time. So this guy, Jimmy Morgan Jr., was one of those, an SCA combat fighter. So he had no guns in his house. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible. He could, I don't know. Why would you not have a gun in Texas? One reason might be if you were a felon. I have no reason to believe Jimmy Morgan Jr. is a felon, but something like that would explain why he might not have guns in the home, but plenty of other edged weapons, which of course a felon is permitted to possess in their home. So continuing here, the intruder, Thomas McGowan. When we see his photo, he doesn't look much like a Thomas McGowan. I mean, when you think what Thomas McGowan looks like in your head, you're probably thinking of something from like the Peaky Blinders TV show, right? Not quite. But Thomas McGowan, 25, drunkenly crashed his car sometime around midnight. McGowan then broke into a nearby trailer home through the front window. That would be the trailer home of Jimmy Morgan Jr. That was an error in judgment by Mr. McGowan. Morgan woke up to the noise and grabbed a medieval short spear. So a spear, of course, we think of that as something being maybe 5 or 6 feet in length. A short spear would be about half that length. So very easy to manipulate in close quarters. When Morgan opened his bedroom window, he found McGowan in his hallway. He advanced with his spear, injured McGowan, and trapped him near the front door. So I would say he didn't really trap him. He definitely speared him. There was a lot of blood. And, you know, you punch into the blood-rich organs of a human body, you get lots of blood. He didn't really trap him. I think it's more a case where McGowan, the intruder, having been speared, was having trouble manipulating the lock on the door to get out. Morgan was happy for McGowan to get out of the house. And ultimately, McGowan ran out of the house, was later found by police. Police booked him in the Wichita County Jail. He had also been charged with arson in 2 years prior to this event, during which the police said McGowan set a house on fire to cover up a burglary. So he's that kind of guy. Next news report, just a few more facts than what we have here and some quotes from the media footage, which we'll watch in just a moment. Police in Wichita Falls, Texas, are charging the 25-year-old with breaking into the home of Jimmy Morgan Jr., a guy who takes Game of Thrones very seriously, enough to own a bunch of weapons worthy of Westeros. McGowan, the intruder, was standing no more than 2 or 3 feet away from me, Morgan told news station. I don't have a firearm, but I have a short spear, very quick, very agile, and very deadly. Well, for sure. Morgan belongs to a medieval fighting club. That would be the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronism. And we do use spears and swords and things of that nature. I'm going to skip over most of the Game of Thrones references. Morgan says he stabbed McGowan once with the spear. I think that would be enough. At which point McGowan just wanted to get the hell out of there. Quote, as he was running, he smeared blood from here to high heaven. And he splattered here, and he splattered there, and he splattered all over there. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. It was like a deer. Yeah, well, why would it be any different? Right? Police arrested McGowan, who was then taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. For whatever reason, Morgan didn't even bother cleaning the blood up before inviting a news crew over. I am a Christian man, Morgan told the news, and I don't want to take life. However, I want to make sure that he understands that his life was mine to take, and I let him have it. Yeah, quite a bit of truth there. Of course, unlawful forcible intruder into your home in Texas, one of the many states where essentially those facts give the home defender every element to self-defense he needs to justify the use of deadly defensive force, open and shut. So certainly Morgan would have been privileged to use as much force as was reasonably necessary to neutralize this threat. And as long as that guy's in the home, having forcibly and lawfully broken in, he's presumed to be an imminent deadly force threat under the law. So let's take a look at Mr. McGowan. This is him. Seems like a pleasant enough gentleman. Doesn't look anything like the guy in Game of Thrones, who I guess the closest analogy would be this gentleman. It's this dude, the arsonist from 2 years prior, sets a house on fire to cover up traces of his burglary. It's not bad enough he's violated your home and stolen your stuff. Then he burns it down. And he's out. 2 years later, he's out. He's out committing another home, driving around drunk, presumably crashing his car around midnight, and then breaking into other people's homes. Again, nice guy. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Now, we are going to jump into the news media footage next, but I did want to mention that my local BJJ school, Gracie University in Colorado Springs, is happening. Good thing I don't talk for a living. Is having a kind of open house, a free self-defense seminar. And last time they did this, I was happy to promote it on the show. I'm happy to do it again. It's this Gracie Jiu-Jitsu 101 free self-defense seminar. Some members of the law self-defense community went to this thing the last time they did it a few months ago, had a great time. So I would encourage anybody within any reasonable distance of Colorado Springs, which is where this event will be, to seriously consider taking a couple of hours and going and trying out jiu-jitsu. It's one of the martial arts that really anybody can learn at any age. I'm learning it. I'm 58 years old, almost 59, a couple months. So anybody can do it. And it's a very effective martial arts. One of the things I like most about it is because it doesn't rely very much at all on striking. It doesn't rely on brute strength. It relies on leverage. It relies on technique. So it's not the strongest person in the fight that necessarily wins, and it gives you a non-deadly force option before you're compelled to go to deadly force and greatly increase the stakes of both the physical fight and the legal fight. So this one happens to be September 23rd, 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Colorado Springs, and you can learn more at gjj101.com would be the URL. All right, folks. And that's Professor Ray down in Colorado Springs is who will be leading that instruction along with his team of fellow instructors. All right, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the news reports on this event. It's only a couple of minutes long. Here we go.
You've heard about Texas homeowners using a gun to defend their property from folks breaking in. In fact, Texas law protects you if you do that in that scenario. It's called the Castle Doctrine.
All right, time for the pet peeve. Is that what the Castle Doctrine really means? No. Castle Doctrine, properly understood, has one meaning only, the only historically correct meaning, and that is if you would have had a legal duty to retreat when defending yourself outside of your home, out in public, you're relieved of that legal duty to retreat before you can defend yourself when you're inside your home defending against an intruder. All Castle Doctrine does, properly understood, is take away the element of avoidance. Now, in most states in the U.S., you don't have that element anyway. You don't have the element of avoidance in an otherwise lawful case of self-defense, whether you're in your home or outside your home, because 39 out of 50 states are stand your ground states. So they relieve you of the legal duty to retreat if you're engaged in otherwise lawful self-defense, any place you have a right to be, out in public or in your home. So if you're in one of those states, the Castle Doctrine doesn't really do much for you because you already don't have a legal duty to retreat. So there's no point to being relieved of a legal duty you don't have anyway. Of course, there are 11 duty to retreat states where if you were out in the street defending yourself before you could use deadly defensive force, if you had a safe avenue of retreat, you'd have a legal duty to take advantage of that safe avenue of retreat. In those duty to retreat states, the Castle Doctrine is helpful because it relieves you of that duty if you're defending yourself inside your home. Now, there are plenty of laws that provide special privilege for the use of force in the context of defending your home, but those are not properly characterized as Castle Doctrine. They often are, but they're different conditions, different exclusions. It's simply a different part of the law than being relieved of an otherwise existing duty to retreat. So Castle Doctrine, often used too broadly, and I don't blame anyone who does it in the sense that even lawyers and judges tend to do this, but it's still wrong. All right, let's continue.
Typically, though, we don't hear about people using medieval castle-like weapons to defend the place. Wichita Falls police arrested a man accused of sneaking into a home, and the homeowner stabbed him with a spear.
All right, first of all, the intruder McGowan didn't sneak into the home, right? Sneaking into the home might not be a forcible entry. And often, to get the benefit of these special privileges to use force in defense of your home, it's required to get those special privileges that the person you're defending against was a forcible and unlawful entrant into the home. By any definition, McGowan was a forcible entrant into the home. He broke a window to gain entry. He didn't sneak in.
Reporter David Gonzalez spoke with that homeowner, Jimmy Morgan Jr., who takes over the story here. And a warning, some of the video is a bit graphic for some.
It's not graphic. You just see some blood on the wall. That's it. Here's Jimmy Morgan Jr.
That window right there, he hit it really hard. Boom! And he came in through. I keep the spear right there. My bed is here. I reach up and grab it. And
Man, if there's anybody's home you don't want to break to in the middle of the night, it's a guy who's got a short spear right next to his bed.
this door is open within 5 seconds, probably within 3 seconds. This door was open, and he was standing no more than 2 to 3 feet away from me. And I looked at him. I didn't see any weapons. However, I was terrified, so I hit.
Do you need to see any weapons when you're dealing with a forcible, unlawful intruder into your home? Not really, because that's why the law creates this legal presumption that a forcible, unlawful intruder in your home is legally presumed to present an imminent deadly force threat. So that's the legal presumption. You don't need to see a deadly force weapon in their home under those circumstances. So get back to the stabbing motion here. By the way, he's describing McGowan being 2 or 3 feet away from him. Is 2 or 3 feet away a danger zone, a lethal danger zone? If we're talking, even if the aggressor's just throwing punches, right? That's where you get the full power. The level 10 punches in is right from that distance. But even if the defender here were armed with a gun, is it all that difficult for an aggressor to take a gun away from you if you're only separated by 2 or 3 feet, whether it's a handgun or a rifle that you're holding? It's not that hard, folks. If you are of the mind to use a gun for personal protection and you have not taken a weapons retention course, I would urge you to do that. You will be shocked at how easy it is to take a firearm away from somebody if it's within reaching distance. And 2 or 3 feet is within reaching distance. That is a danger zone. Someone's 10 or 15 feet away from you, they can still rush you, but the prospects of them being able to strip your gun from you before you can get rounds off, hopefully, is pretty limited. If they're within 2 or 3 feet, they can take that gun like that. What's harder to take off of somebody from 2 or 3 feet away? A gun in their hand or a bladed weapon in their hand? I would suggest it's harder to strip the bladed weapon. If they're holding a knife, what are you going to grab on that knife? The blade? That's not going to be any fun. If they're pointing the tip of the short spear at you, what do you have to do to get to that weapon? Well, you got to run through the tip of the spear. That's not going to be any fun. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating that you defer to a short spear as a practical matter rather than a firearm for defense of your home, but it's worth understanding the strengths and weaknesses of every defensive option. Here we go.
Terrified, so I hit him, and so he started retreating, and I started advancing, and I was stalking him here.
By the way, so the people I know who are engaged in this Society for Creative Anachronism they're all great people, responsible adults, they're awesome. But it's not hard to imagine that someone who feels so strongly about that activity, the recreation of the medieval type fighting with impact weapons, swords, contact weapons, maces, short spears, that they might have fantasized, what would this be like in real life, right? Not just the acting where no one's supposed to get hurt. No one does get hurt. A very safe activity, SCA, but in real life. I mean, there was a time when people were stabbing each other with spears in real life, right? What would that be like? And then you break into a dude's house who's imagined that scenario maybe 1,000 times, and he's got a short spear in his hand. Man, that's a tough spot to be in, and it didn't work out too well for McGowan. So he stabs him with the short spear. Deep penetration, blood-rich organs, blood starts going everywhere.
You never cross your legs, and I cornered him.
There's the door to get out. You see the blood smeared all over the door. He probably put his hand over the wound, as one would naturally do, and now he has to manipulate the lock on the door. He broke in, but he's got to use a door to get out.
Right here. The door.
Look at that. He's lucky to be alive.
Was locked and shut. He was panicked.
So look at that lock. I mean, this is a trailer home, really, and there's no real, as a kid who grew up in New York City, I would say there are no locks on this door. But it's like an interior bathroom type doorknob with the little turn thing in the middle, right, to lock it for privacy when you're in the bathroom, which is no security at all, really. But imagine trying to manipulate that little that little turn knob in the middle when you've just been speared and you got blood coming out of your body and your hands are covered in blood. That's what McGowan was struggling with. He so bad wanted to get out of that house, and he had to fumble there with the stupid lock while the dude who just speared him is standing there ready to spear him again.
At this point, he said, I can't get out. I can't get out. After fumbling and making a real disaster at this point of my door, he calmed down and opened it. And as he was running, he smeared blood from here to high heaven. And he splattered here, and then he splattered there, and splattered all over there. It was like a deer. I do a hobby. It's called the SCA. It's medieval fighting. And we do use spears and swords and things of that nature. I don't have a firearm. So I have a short spear, very quick, very agile, and very deadly. He banged on my house, and with under a minute, I was up, had the spear, and I got him. I am a Christian man, and I don't want to take life. However, I want to make sure that he understands that his life was mine to take, and I let him have it.
Lesson is never bring your fist to a spear fight. Wichita Falls police say they caught 25-year-old Tom McGowan after he led the chase. McGowan was treated and released from the hospital for his spear wounds. Then he went to jail.
And there we are. So that's the video clip. Interesting. So now we're going to talk a little bit about, about some of the actual legal dynamics here, proportionality, intensity of force, and other variables. Before we do, though, I do want to mention, for any of you who live anywhere near Nashville, you know my buddy, hopefully Nick Replica. Nick Replica is doing one of his meetups in Nashville on Saturday, September 16th, and I will be there. I'll be on the stage with a bunch of other friends of Nick. We'll be having some drinks, telling some jokes, having a good time. So if you are interested in meeting us, and we won't only be on the stage, we'll be in the crowd too throughout the evening. If you're interested in meeting Nick or me in person and you live in the Nashville area, you might consider taking advantage of this opportunity to come join us. This will be, let's see what I can call this. I'll call this Replica Nashville, and I'll put a shortcut link in here. There it is. So if you go to lawofselfdefense.com/Nick, you'll get to the page that you're seeing here, and you can sign up for a ticket. I don't know why there's a price range. I don't get any of the ticket revenue. In my experience going to Nick's events, the ticket revenue is purely to cover the cost of the venue, folks. It's not really a profit-making enterprise, but there has to be a venue, and the venue charges, and so Nick has to recover the cost of that. But if you're interested in coming, lawofselfdefense.com/Nick. I'll be happy to have a drink with you and have some fun. We may even give out my tie. We'll have to see about that. We'll have to see how that works. So lawofselfdefense.com/Nick. All right. Yes, doing a lot of promotion for other people, which is fine. They're all friends of mine. Happy to do it. So let's talk about some of the legal dynamics here. So proportionality, force, two buckets of force for use of force law purposes. There's non-deadly force and there's deadly force. Deadly force is more than force that can cause death. It also includes force that can cause serious bodily injury. What is serious bodily injury? Some states define it by statute. Some states it's in case law. The general concept that it's more than just a bruise. It's typically some kind of disabling injury, a broken bone, a maiming injury, blinding, loss of consciousness, permanent scarring. Rape would qualify in that deadly force bucket, that serious bodily injury bucket. So force that can kill or cause serious bodily injury, not just can, but is likely to, readily able to, not just some hypothetical possibility, 1 in a million chance. It's force that's likely to cause death or serious bodily injury. That's the deadly force bucket. Of course, that would include guns. That would include most edged weapons, including a short spear. The other bucket is non-deadly force. Non-deadly force is all lesser degrees of force that would not qualify as deadly force. And the general rule is if you're only facing a non-deadly force threat, you can only use non-deadly force in self-defense. That you can't use deadly force in self-defense unless you're facing a deadly force threat. Now, there are some edge cases where it might be legally presumed that the threat you're facing is deadly, but the condition is still required. We're simply legally requiring it, legally presuming it to that condition to have been satisfied. Now, when you're in the non-deadly force bucket, there is a continuum of non-deadly force because there's lots of degrees of force that don't achieve the level of deadly force, but are distinguishable from each other. So there's a forceful shove, for example, that's hard enough to make you take a couple steps back, not readily likely to kill you or cause serious bodily injury. But it's still substantially more force than if someone were just to tap you on the chest with their finger. Right? Now, technically, both of those are simple batteries, crimes. If it's not desired, right? It's done in an offensive way. It's an unlawful touching of another person, which is just a battery. An unlawful touching not likely to cause death or serious bodily injury, simple battery. It's a criminal act. Neither one of them is permissible. But they're distinguishable in the law because their intensities of force are very different. Finger tap on the chest, forcible shove with the hands. So when you're in the non-deadly force bucket, you have to be sensitive to these distinctions of the intensity of force because there is a requirement of proportionality within the non-deadly bucket because different acts are distinguishable based on their intensity of force. And your response in self-defense has to be proportional to the force used or threatened against you. So the force you can use in defense against the shove may be much more substantial than the force you can use in defense against the finger poke. Not quite deadly defensive force option because you're not in the deadly force bucket. You're still in the non-deadly force bucket. But if someone goes to poke you in the chest with a finger, maybe slapping their hand away would be a proportional response. But pepper spraying them in the face, maybe not. If someone shoves you hard enough to knock you back a couple steps, well, maybe pepper spray to the face, still a non-deadly force response, would be proportional to the shove. So within the non-deadly force bucket, you do have to be sensitive to the need to maintain proportionality within that bucket. What about if you're in the deadly force bucket? You're facing a deadly force threat, a threat likely to cause death or serious bodily injury, either the actual use or the imminent threatened use of that deadly force. What can you respond with? Do you need to be concerned about proportionality there? Is there a difference between different kinds of deadly force? Someone's choking you to death. Someone's trying to hit you in the head with a brick or a bat. Someone's shooting you with a .22 caliber pistol or a .44 Magnum pistol or a rifle or a shotgun or a machine gun. Are these different types of force within the deadly force bucket? Are they distinguishable for proportionality purposes? And the answer is no. Once you're in the deadly force bucket, all deadly force is equal to all other deadly force. There's no lesser or greater degrees of deadly force. If someone is choking you to death and it's a deadly force attack, you can respond with any degree of deadly force to defend yourself from that deadly force attack. You're not limited, for example, to responding only by attempting to choke them to death. That's not what proportionality requires. Proportionality allows you to use the degree of force necessary to protect yourself from that deadly force attack. That may mean shooting them or stabbing them or anything that would qualify as deadly defensive force. The law doesn't really distinguish between types of deadly force. So, someone's trying to stab you with a knife, and it just happens that you're holding a rope that's suspending a piano above that person's head. Now, if you drop a piano on someone's head, is that likely to cause death or serious bodily injury? Sure. They're trying to stab you with a knife, you let go of the rope, you drop the piano on their head. Is that a proportional response? Yes. because all you need to ask is, was it deadly defensive force in response to a deadly force attack? The law doesn't really care what your precise mechanism of deadly defensive force was. It cares a lot that if you're using deadly defensive force, you were responding to a deadly force threat. That it cares about. But the precise nature of your deadly defensive force on legal merit doesn't really matter. So someone's trying to kill you and you respond with a knife, or you respond with a gun, which would be most common, right? Law-abiding people normally using firearms in self-defense. That's fine. What if you respond with a piano on the head? Fine. What if you respond by hitting them with your car, if you happen to be in your car? Hitting someone with a car is deadly force. It's fine if you're responding to that person's deadly force attack. And here we have a spear, a short spear. Fine. Clearly stabbing someone with a spear is a deadly force act. But that's lawful if you're responding to a deadly force attack and you're acting in otherwise lawful self-defense. So in terms of legal merit, the fact that this guy used a spear instead of a gun makes no legal difference at all. That said, part of how a prosecutor views a case is the theater of the case. Remember, this is ultimately all about storytelling. What the jury hears in court are two stories: a story of guilt told by the prosecutor and a story of innocence told by the defense. And the more elements that you hand a prosecutor to craft an interesting story, the more likely the prosecutor is to find that story interesting and maybe decide to make the effort to put it in front of a jury and see what a jury has to say about it. So I always urge people in their choice of defensive options, if you have the luxury, to make your defensive options as boring as possible. So if you were using a gun for self-defense, a pistol for self-defense, my first suggestion would be find out whatever your local police department carries as a pistol and pick that one. Now, that's not to the point of being inconsistent with safety or inconsistent with being able to use it effectively. If your local department carries a Glock 17 and that's simply too large a gun for your hand, then obviously don't pick that, but pick something. The more similar your defensive tools appear to the really uninformed eye as those used by your local police, the less odd they look, the more standardized, the more boring they look. And looking boring is good in court if your legal justification is self-defense. You want to look as boring as possible. If you were to pick some super esoteric pistol for self-defense, that could be a hook that a prosecutor decides is sufficiently interesting that they'll take you to trial just because they have an interesting story to tell and see if it will work. If you're picking some other weapon, a tomahawk, a short spear, a broadsword, a crossbow, that's not boring anymore. That begins to look kind of weird. Does it change anything on the legal merits? No. Exactly the same self-defense argument as if you had used a gun in self-defense. But it's sufficiently odd, it may make a prosecutor more interested in taking that case to trial than if you had used a gun to go to trial. So just fair warning there. All right, let me think if there was more that I wanted to say about that. While I'm thinking about that, let me go to the Law of Self-Defense chat and see what the members have to say. The Law of Self-Defense members. Remember, you can be a member instantly right now. Still join this show and every other show we do as a member. Get your questions and comments answered for free. No super chat fees, nothing like that. Get your 2-week trial membership for 99 cents at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. Stay a member after that. It's only about 30 cents a day, less than $10 a month. Go to lawofselfdefense.com/trial for that. All right. Ooh, lots of stuff in the chat. So let's take a look. Let me pull this over so I'm looking more into the camera. Let's see. All right. All the usual suspects. We tend to get the same members coming every show. Law of Self-Defense member Paul says, I'd hate to see someone coming at me with a battle axe or a spear. That's an ugly way to go. Yeah, I personally, and I've had considerable training in defense and offense with guns and bladed weapons. I would much rather be shot with a 9mm pistol than stabbed with a spear, hit with a tomahawk, or gutted with a knife. Bladed weapons are unbelievably destructive. I imagine there's probably videos on YouTube illustrating this on, like, beef, cuts of beef, but they just open you up, folks. It's nasty. Bladed weapons are very, very nasty. Law Self-Defense member Dave says, we have a class where everyone has a marker to represent a knife. When we went through several common scenarios we found on the internet, it ends there. I presume Dave would say that everyone's marked with the marker. Yeah. It's hard not to get cut if you find yourself in a fight and the other guy's got a knife. Very, very difficult. If he's close enough to reach you, you're almost certainly going to get cut. Let's see. Yeah, Law Self-Defense member Jeffrey says, my self-defense arsenal is very deficient in the spear and sword areas. Maybe I should beef that up. I must confess, I do not have a short spear in my self-defense arsenal. I do have a very nice tomahawk that I received as a gift for speaking at a self-defense conference. It's lovely. It's engraved and everything. Oh, I don't have it here in the office, or I would show it to you, but maybe I'll bring it in for a future show. Law Self-Defense member D says, our defensive tactics instructor had training knives with electroshock edges. That's interesting. I've actually never heard of that. Adjustable from tingle to dam. It reduced knife training from dancing around to serious work. Yeah, I bet it would. That's interesting. I've never heard of that. Let's see. Law Self-Defense member Zach says, speaking of self-defense and dealing with an unlawful intruder, how does this headline strike you? A Melbourne man who overpowered and raped an intruder will spend at least 4 years in prison. Man, I was thinking about going to visit Melbourne. Yeah, well, obviously rape would not be an act of defensive dwelling or of self. So he took it a bit over the top. I would imagine it permanently dissuaded that particular intruder from repeating that error. But yes, that would obviously be that's sufficiently non-boring that you're going to go to prosecution for sure. Let's see. Law Self-Defense member Jeffrey says, we have a big multi-week Renaissance fair in Ohio. These guys are big, strong, and could be violent. Yeah, we actually have a big one here, not far from me, in Colorado. It's down by Palmer Lake. What the hell? What's the name of that town? I went for the first time just this year to the Renaissance Festival. It was quite. Larkspur is where it is. Larkspur, Colorado. It's a big piece of land, and they have, like, I believe they're permanent structures there. Lots of vendors selling, medieval type clothing and jewelry and weapons there. It was fun. We took the kids. They had a good time. It was fun was had by all. Let's see. Yeah, there are a number of companies, modern companies, that sell a variety of spears. I'm not familiar with that marketplace, but I'm sure if you Google it, you would find it. Let's see. A tactical spear. That would be, aren't they all tactical? How would you have a non-tactical spear? Okay, let's see. Yes, Law Self-Defense member Eric says the home intruder was probably just trying to get medicine for his sick grandmother. Yeah, like codeine, right? Zach asks, was the name of the spear Brittany? That's a dad joke right there. Yeah, it would have been funny if he had a shield too. Yes, that would have been funny. Let's see. Law self-defense member Jeffrey asks, if you're testifying in this case or in a case, do you try to clarify the common misperception of castle doctrine or just let it slide even if one of the sides is misrepresenting the doctrine? It depends on whether it would be relevant to an adjudication by the jury. If it could change the verdict, if it could introduce some ambiguity that could lead to an unjust verdict, then I would definitely clarify the distinction. Otherwise, maybe not. There's a limited amount of time I have on the witness stand as an expert witness. When I do my normal law self-defense advanced course, it's 7-8 hours long. I don't have that much time on a witness stand. So I have to be careful to focus my energies on where they're most relevant for the facts of a particular case. Law self-defense member Paul says, that guy must have been soiling himself. Yeah, I would have been. Let's see. Zach says, I don't want to take your life, but right now it's mine to take. I would take that dude at his word, for sure. Jeffrey, good thing he didn't die, or the leftists would be calling for an assault spear ban. Undoubtedly. Zach says, I've seen many Looney Tune shows. A piano dropping on you doesn't kill you. You just get some birds around your head for a little bit, and your eyes go all googly. Right. Of course. I remember those shows well. Eric says, this reminds me of the police officer who had something like "Make my day" etched on his gun. Not relevant to the case, but fodder for prosecution. Yeah, so that was a police officer who was using an AR rifle, and on the dust cover is a little flappy door over the ejection port of an AR. You can close it to keep dust from getting on the bolt, and then when the weapon fires, that little springy door gets thrown open so the brass can eject. And on the inside of that door, so you would only see it after it was fired. I believe it said "You're effed" etched on the inside. And the officer was charged with a crime, a use of force crime for this event. And the prosecutor tried to get admitted into evidence that etching on the dust cover door as going to state of mind of the officer, that he was willing to use force even if it wasn't legally required, as evidenced by his state of mind, which in turn was evidenced by this "You're effed" on the dust cover. And this was something obviously the officer had added to the AR himself, right? The department doesn't issue ARs with that on it. The officer got very lucky because the judge there decided that that evidence was more prejudicial than probative, than helpful to the jury. So the jury actually never saw it. It was excluded from the jury. But yes, that's exactly the kind of thing that would pique a prosecutor's interest and make it more likely. Just like if you had a Glock, the back plate on the Glock, you put a Punisher back plate on there. Who's the Punisher? He's a vigilante who explicitly uses deadly force outside the legal boundaries. Is that who you are? Is that who you think you are? It sure looks like it. Glock didn't sell you that pistol with a Punisher backplate on it. You put that on. That's a statement you're making, a prosecutor would argue. So, and none of that stuff, none of that "You're effed" on the dust cover or the Punisher backplate, it doesn't help the weapon run better. It doesn't improve your chances of winning the physical fight. All it does is complicate your legal fight. So please don't do stuff like that. It's pointless. Zach says, it's just like everything else to a prosecutor. Everything you do is wrong. This was the wrong spear to use, not from the right century. Right. Well, it's true, though. I mean, whatever ammo you pick, for example, is always the wrong ammo. Did you use ball ammo? You should have used hollow point. Did you use hollow point ammo? You should have used ball. Whatever you pick is going to be wrong. So there are always hooks that a prosecutor can use. The real question is, how damaging are those likely to be, and how easy is it for your counsel, defense counsel, to mitigate the damage? So things like hollow points, I mean, I've seen prosecutors point to that, but the bailiffs in the courtroom are also using hollow points. Every police officer who investigated the case is using hollow points. So it's not very damaging, and it's not hard to mitigate the damage. But the weirder you get, the more damaging it potentially could be. Law self-defense member Andrew asks, are weapon lights, laser scopes then not recommended to be boring? It changes, right? So it's increasingly common for even police departments now to have weapons mounted lights and to have mini red dot sights on their service pistols. So I think that's become so common that it's not sufficiently odd anymore to not be boring. A laser that projects a dot, that's not that common. And you see it in movies a lot. Things like having a suppressor, not that common. Does shooting someone in otherwise lawful self-defense with a suppressor on your weapon change the legal merits of your act of self-defense? No, it doesn't at all. Assuming, of course, you lawfully are in possession of the suppressor, which can be a little bit complicated. But no, the fact that you use a suppressor doesn't change the use of force analysis. But when do most people see suppressors? In the movies, they're being used by bad guys to commit assassinations, right? Is that a narrative a prosecutor might try to build? Yeah. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use a suppressor. I mean, I don't know. There's arguments both ways. Does it modestly complicate your legal defense argument? Maybe, but that's why you hire good counsel. I wouldn't tell you don't use a suppressor. I would tell you don't put a Punisher backplate on your Glock. Absolutely. That's only damaging. There's no upside. There can be tactical upsides to, say you're using an AR for home defense and you have a suppressor on it. Well, it's still loud, but it's not, you fire an AR rifle inside an enclosed space. It's really loud. Maybe you don't have time to put ear protection on. Maybe you want to be able to communicate with your family members. So there's good reasons to put a suppressor on a weapon. And so you'd have to arrive at that balance yourself. It's not like a suppressor would be utterly destructive of your claim of self-defense. On the legal merits, it shouldn't change it at all. But it is somewhat unusual. So just be aware of that. Lasers the same way. You're projecting a dot onto somebody. There's good reasons to use a laser. Maybe your vision's not great. Maybe you can't see the front sight anymore. Maybe you're hoping that if the bad guy sees the red dot on his chest, that will deter further aggression. Those are all reasonable hypotheses, reasonable tactical decisions. So I'm not telling you not to do that, but it can modestly complicate. If you use a laser on your gun in self-defense, does that undermine the legal merit of your otherwise lawful claim of self-defense? No. Is it something for a prosecutor to talk about? Yes. Now, I want to circle back to weapons mounted lights because this is important. I know lots of people, especially police, but lots of civilians are increasingly carrying their personal defensive weapons with a light on it. And they have a holster that's specifically designed to accommodate that light on the rail, on the pistol. And that's fine. I'm not telling anyone not to do that. I don't do that because I don't like the way the pistol, to me, it cycles weird with the light on it. And that might just be because I haven't put enough rounds through a pistol with the light mounted. Maybe if I put 10,000 rounds through it, it would be more comfortable. I find it uncomfortable, the way the gun cycles with the light on it. And the truth is, when I'm outside my home, when I'm just out in public, you're very rarely in a place that's actually completely dark, utterly dark, as if you were in a cave. Because if you were in such a place, how would a bad guy find you to attack you in the first place? It's black for him too, right? I mean, bad guys aren't walking around with night vision goggles on. So I don't feel the need to have a weapons mounted light on the gun I'm carrying out in public. In my home, every weapon I have prepared for home defense has a light on it. Why is that? Well, because sometimes in your home, it can be completely dark. Right? It's nighttime. You have all the lights off to go to sleep. There may well, and lots of people prefer to sleep in an environment where there is no ambient light, total darkness. That's total darkness. And in that case, you'll need a light to be able to see. Plus, there are likely, if you have a family, there are things in that house you definitely do not want to be unintentionally shooting because of misidentification. So if any weapon you have in your home, any firearm you have in your home, for defense, I would urge you absolutely have a high quality light on it. And the high quality lights are super damn bright. I would consider them defensive weapons in their own right. You put a 600 plus lumen light in someone's face, all they're seeing is a wall of white. They can't see what you're doing. They can't see what your position looks like. They're blinded effectively. And it's bright enough that you can also bounce it off of walls. So you don't necessarily need to point your muzzle, if it's a weapon mounted light, at the threat. You can, because maybe the threat turns out to be a family member, right? Maybe it's a teenager sneaking back into the house, for example. You can point the muzzle at a wall and the light just washes around the entire room. So something to think about. Now, I will say, out in public, I don't have a weapons mounted light when I'm out in public. I always have a light in my pocket. I said that. Now I have to wonder if I have the light in my pocket. Let's see. I do. What is it? It's I buy a bunch of these. It's a Streamlight ProTac 1L 1AA. It's a little rechargeable, USB rechargeable light. Oh no, this is the battery one. So they make a variant of this that's USB rechargeable as well. And I like these. They're not too expensive. They're pretty bright. They're not too big. They're easy to carry. And so I always have that on my person when I'm out and about, because it can be handy to have a light. But I don't go with a weapons mounted light. It doesn't mean that people who do are bad or making a bad decision. It's just my personal preference. But inside the home, I urge you, these cases where a homeowner fires a shot and inadvertently shoots a wife or a kid, folks, that absolutely should just never happen. Let's see. People talking about Renaissance fairs now. Jeff says, I go every year, can't get that big turkey leg to eat for the next 15 minutes anywhere else. Well, you could go to Disney, but that's quite a bit more expensive. Let's see. Yeah, Dave says lasers are verification tools most useful during CQC from 10 feet in. No time to get the gun up into line of sight. Therefore, the laser informs you of where the round will go. I don't have a problem with lasers. And I think Dave says this will work in your favor in court. And it may well. It's an affirmation of your intent to make sure the bullets only hit what they're supposed to hit. And I don't think that's a bad plan. I've never used lasers mounted on a pistol or a rifle, so I don't have any personal experience. When I was taught CQC with a pistol, we trained enough that the prospects of not hitting the target at CQC distances with a pistol in retention was pretty. I never felt I was going to miss at those ranges under those conditions. But it's not like a laser would hurt, I suppose. So I would urge people to try it out. Lasers are not that costly. Try it out. Get some training. See how you like it. All right, folks. I think that may be everything I had to share. I will. Let me see. Where am I? I'll mention one more time because it's coming up just 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tomorrow, I'll be in Nashville with Nick Rekieta, with Camelot. Is it 551? 511? Camelot, anyway. And a bunch of other people at Nick's get-together meetup in Nashville on Saturday, September 16th. If you'd like to meet us, this is where you need to go. Let's see. I'll put the little link up there. Easy to remember, shortcut link, lawofselfdefense.com/Nick. I'm not paid to be there, folks. In fact, it's going to cost me a good chunk of money to go out there. I'm actually bringing the whole family. My kids have never been to Nashville, so we're making a mini vacation out of it for the family. This is the cost is just to cover the venue for Nick. But if you'd like to meet us, have a couple drinks, tell some jokes, we'll be in the crowd, we'll be on stage. I did this with Nick in Vegas a few months ago. It was great fun. I did lose a good tie, $100 plus tie. Maybe I'll lose a tie this time too. We'll have to see what happens. But if that sounds of interest, lawofselfdefense.com/Nick. Should be fun. All right, folks, with that out of the way, and we're in, I will wrap up today's show. Remember, if you carry a gun, carry a knife, carry pepper spray, practice jujitsu. Oh, and remember, folks, the Jiu-Jitsu open house by Colorado Springs coming up soon. Soon. Oh, come on. Where the heck is it? It is here. GJJ, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu 101.com, open house, Colorado Springs. Check it out. If you practice jiu-jitsu, you do all those things. I do all those things so that I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill. Then you also owe it to yourself and your family to make sure you know the law so you're hard to convict as well. Until next time, I remain attorney Andrew Branca for Law of Self-Defense. Stay safe.